Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we venture into Canada's most remote and unforgiving territory, where the vast wilderness of the Yukon holds secrets that have remained buried in permafrost and silence for decades. 7 true accounts from those who have faced the darkness in a land where help is hundreds of kilometers away, and the cold can kill you faster than whatever might be hunting you. These are the stories that law enforcement could not solve, that families have never forgotten, and that survivors can never escape. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of the Yukon wilderness, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Elias Turner, and what happened to me in the Yukon back in the winter of 2019 is something I still can't talk about without my hands shaking. I worked seasonal jobs around Dawson City, mostly hauling supplies to mining sites. The pay was good, but the isolation does something to your mind. That night, I was driving a supply truck toward an old exploration camp called Silver Ridge. It was nearly midnight, snow swallowing my headlights, and the road ahead was nothing but a narrow cut through miles of untouched wilderness. They say the Yukon is quiet, but that night the silence felt wrong, as if someone else was listening through it. Around 12:30 a.m., I saw something in the beam of my high beam's footprints. Fresh ones, not animal, human, barefoot. They led straight across the road and disappeared into the tree line. At first, I thought it was hypothermia, some drunk traveler who wandered off. But the strange part? The prints were too wide, the toes unusually long, and pressed so deep into the snow it looked like whoever made them weighed far more than a normal man. My gut told me to keep driving. But something else, some stupid instinct, made me stop the truck and open my door. The moment my boots touched the snow, the wind died completely, and from inside the dark tree line, I heard breathing. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Like something was waiting for me to step closer. I should have gotten back in the truck. I should have closed the door, turned the wheel, and driven until I saw lights again. But something about that breathing, deep, almost congested, rooted me in place. It sounded like it came from a chest far bigger than any person I'd ever met. Not a bear, not a moose. Something wrong. The cold air felt thick, almost oily, as if it was wrapping around my face. I took one step toward the tree line, and the breathing instantly stopped. The forest became absolutely still. Even the falling snow seemed to slow down. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Then, from deeper in the trees, I heard the crunch of snow, one slow, heavy step, then another. Something was walking toward me. My instincts screamed to move, but my legs didn't listen. I felt like prey, frozen in a predator's stare. The shape finally emerged. Barely visible between the pines, it stood upright. Tall, too tall. Its shoulders were almost brushing the lower branches. I couldn't see its face, just a long, dark outline against the snow. Then it spoke. A voice so low and warped it didn't sound like speech, more like the memory of speech. It said my name. Elias? Not shouted, not whispered. Just spoken, like it had been waiting. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and the thing took one long stride forward, covering nearly 15 feet in a single movement. That's when I turned and ran back to my truck. But as soon as I slammed the door shut, I saw it step out of the tree line. Not running, just following. I floored the accelerator so hard, the truck fishtailed, tires spinning on the packed snow before finally catching traction. My headlights swayed wildly across the road as the vehicle lurched forward. But I didn't care. I just needed distance. I needed something solid between me and that thing. For the first few seconds, I didn't look back. I couldn't. But the feeling of being watched pushed into the back of my skull like cold fingers. Finally, against every instinct, I glanced into the side mirror. It was walking in the middle of the road. Not running, not struggling, just striding slowly, each step impossibly long, covering ground far faster than anything on two legs should. Even as I sped up, the distance between us didn't grow as quickly as it should have. Its arms were too long. I noticed that for the first time they hung almost to its knees. The shoulders were hunched, as if the body was built for something else, something that didn't involve standing upright. I pushed the truck to 70 on a road that should never be taken above 40. The suspension shook violently, but I kept going until the creature faded into darkness behind me. Only then did I breathe. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Eventually, the fear dulled just enough for a dangerous thought to creep in. Maybe I imagined it hypothermia, exhaustion, shadows in the snow. And then, my truck's radio turned on by itself. Static at first, then a voice, warped, deep, and stretched, like it was coming from underwater. "Elias, why did you run?" My hand slipped on the wheel. It had followed me, not physically, but somehow it had found another way to reach me. I grabbed the radio dial with shaking fingers and tried to shut it off, but the knob wouldn't turn. It was frozen in place, vibrating under my hand, as if something inside was forcing it to stay powered. The static grew louder, filling the cab until it felt like needles pushing into my ears. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Elias, don't leave me." The sound had a strange echo to it, like it was repeating inside my skull rather than through the speakers. I slammed my fist against the dashboard. The radio snapped off instantly, not with a fade, not with a click, just gone, like it had never been on at all. I sucked in a breath, trying to convince myself the worst was over. But something else caught my attention. The road ahead was changing. The snow, once untouched, now showed tracks, not tire tracks. Footprints, a single line of them going straight down the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. Huge, deep, spaced, far apart, the same footprints I saw earlier. I slowed down, heart pounding so hard it felt like it shook the steering wheel. There was no way those prints could be ahead of me, unless the thing was no longer behind me. As my lights passed over them one by one, I realized something even worse. Every print was pointed toward me, as if whatever made them had been walking backward, facing my truck the entire time. And then, right as the thought struck, my engine stalled, the dashboard died, the lights shut off, and the truck rolled to a silent stop in the middle of the Yukon wilderness. The darkness was absolute. No headlights, no dashboard glow, not even the moon through the heavy clouds. The silence pressed against me from all sides, thick and unnatural. I tried the ignition once, twice, 5 times, nothing. The engine didn't even click. It was like the truck wasn't dead, just unplugged from reality. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield as panic set in. I pressed my forehead against the wheel, gripping it so tightly my knuckles ached. Then something shifted outside. Not footsteps, not breathing. It was weight. Snow compacting beneath something heavy, circling the front of the truck, slow, methodical steps, each one deliberate, as if it wanted me to hear every movement, every approach. I didn't dare lift my head. I just listened, step crunch, step crunch. It moved from the front to the side of the truck, then stopped right next to the driver's door. so close I could feel the faint vibration through the metal. A shadow moved across the windshield. Tall, distorted, completely wrong. Even in the darkness, I sensed it leaning toward me, examining me through the glass, and then something tapped on the window. Not a knuckle, not a claw, but something long, smooth, jointed in a way that didn't match any human finger. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. I held my breath so tightly my lungs burned. That's when it spoke again. Not from the radio, not from outside, but from inside the truck, from the back seat. "Elias, don't look." My entire body locked up. That voice didn't echo this time. It didn't distort. It sounded real, close enough that I felt the breath against the back of my neck, slowly, painfully slowly. I turned my eyes toward the rearview mirror, but the mirrors showed nothing, only darkness. The voice came again, this time from behind my right shoulder. "Don't look, Elias. You won't understand what I am." My heartbeat thrashed in my chest. I couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed to fling the door open and run into the snow, but another part of me, the terrified, frozen part, kept me glued to the seat. I forced myself to speak. "What do you want?" The air grew colder. The windows frosted at the edges, thin branches of ice spreading across the glass like pale veins. My breath shivered into the darkness. "I followed you," it said. "You stepped into my path." A long, shifting movement rustled behind me. Not like a person adjusting position, but like something unfolding, stretching in ways a body shouldn't. A faint smell drifted through the cab, wet soil, iron, and something old, older than the forest itself. "I've watched you for months." My stomach dropped. "I've worn faces, walked behind you, learning you." My throat tightened so hard I couldn't swallow. Then something brushed the back of my head, smooth, cold, and impossibly long. It slid across my hair like a fingertip studying texture. "You ran from me," it whispered, "but now you can't." The truck creaked as if something massive shifted its weight inside the cabin. And then, the back seat exhaled. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw my shoulder into the driver's door, forcing it open so hard the cold air punched into the cab like a wave. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I just ran into the snow-covered road, boots slipping, lungs burning from the freezing air. Behind me, the truck groaned, the frame bending as something heavy moved inside it, but I didn't stop running. The forest on both sides looked identical, endless black walls of pine. The only sound was my breathing and the crunch of snow beneath my boots. The world felt too big, too empty, like I had stepped outside reality. Then I saw it. A light, not bright, faint, warm, flickering, coming from deep inside the trees. A cabin? A campfire? Anything human would have been salvation. I didn't think. I sprinted toward it, branches slashing my jacket, snow hitting my face like needles behind me. Something broke through the door of my truck. The sound split the night. Metal twisting, glass shattering, followed by a long, low growl that didn't belong to any animal on Earth. I forced myself deeper into the trees, chasing that small glow until it finally took shape. A wooden cabin half buried in snow, no smoke from the chimney, windows dark except for one. A lantern flickering inside, I reached the door and pounded on it with both fists. "Hello, someone, please." Footsteps approached from inside. Slow, heavy. Relief washed over me. Someone was alive. But then the door creaked open, and the person standing there wasn't breathing. I froze, chest heaving, eyes locked on the figure in the doorway. At first, I thought it was just a person, a hunter, a miner, Someone who could help relief surged, almost enough to push away the fear. Then I saw its face. Pale. Too pale. Eyes blacker than any shadow around it, reflecting nothing. Absorbing the dim lantern light, its mouth was stretched into a grin that didn't make sense. Too wide, too sharp, almost wrong for a human jaw. And the hands. The fingers were long, slender, bending in unnatural angles. It tilted its head at me like a curious animal. "You brought him here," it said. Its voice a whisper, yet it carried through the trees, freezing my blood. "You can't hide from him." I wanted to step back, run, anything. But my legs wouldn't move. The snow under my boots felt like glue. The cabin door, meant to be salvation, suddenly felt like a trap. I looked over its shoulder and realized the interior of the cabin was empty, except for a single chair in the corner. On that chair, the outline of something seated tall, still, watching, waiting. The figure in the doorway smiled again. "You saw him on the road. Now he sees you." Before I could speak, the lantern flickered violently. The black-eyed figure vanished, but the sound remained. Slow, deliberate breathing, coming from all around me. And then, the voice I had been hearing since the truck. "Elias, why did you run?" I bolted. Through snow, through trees, through shadows that seemed to bend toward me. Every step felt like it was measured, counted, predicted. The forest itself seemed alive, branches curling to block paths, roots tangling at my feet. Behind me, the slow crunching of impossible footsteps grew louder, nearer, though I couldn't see a thing, and the sky had vanished behind thick clouds, the moon hidden, leaving only darkness to swallow me whole. I ran for what felt like hours, lungs burning, snow soaking through my layers. The figure, or thing, kept pace. I could hear it breathing, dragging, shifting. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, the shadows moved differently, almost as if they had form. Eventually, I stumbled into a frozen creek, ice cracking under my weight. I didn't care. I scrambled across, half submerged in freezing water, adrenaline masking the cold. Then, the strangest thing, silence. I stopped, trembling, looking back. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no black-eyed figure. Just the wind, whispering through the trees I dared to step forward. And the snow behind me was covered in prints. Hundreds of them. Wide, long, overlapping, not leading anywhere. Just a chaotic mess, and in the middle of the prints, unmistakably, my own footprints, leading away from me. I realized with a sinking heart, I wasn't running from it. I had been running into it all along. I forced myself to move again, staggering through the forest, following the chaotic prints, hoping they might lead somewhere real, somewhere safe. My mind was screaming. Logic, memory, sanity, everything shattered in the Yukon night. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me. I collapsed behind a snow-laden pine, my body shaking from cold and fear. I dared not close my eyes completely. But sleep, weak and dangerous, claimed me for a few minutes. When I woke, the first thing I noticed was silence. Absolute silence. No wind, no snow, no breathing, nothing. I opened my eyes fully, and the snow around me was completely undisturbed. No footprints, no creek, no signs of my long trek. It was as if the forest had never been crossed at all. Shaking, I stumbled forward until finally, the first flicker of dawn appeared on the horizon. My legs carried me back to the main road, where I found my truck perfectly parked, engine running, heater on, untouched. Inside the cab, nothing. No snow tracked in, no broken glass, no signs of the presence that had haunted me for hours. Just the warmth of a running engine. I never spoke to anyone about what happened. Nobody would believe me. The footprints, the voice, the black-eyed figure. None of it left any evidence behind. Years later, I still feel it, watching, waiting. Something in the Yukon doesn't like people wandering alone, something that moves silently through the snow. Following those who dare step into its path, I never went back. And I never will. Sometimes, when the wind is right, I hear it whisper my name. Elias. My name is Marissa Hale, and this happened during a solo hiking trip in the Yukon in the summer of 2021. I'd planned the adventure meticulously. Map, GPS, emergency radio, enough supplies for a week. The locals warned me about sudden fogs, rogue bears, and disappearing trails, but I laughed it off. I was experienced. I was careful. I had done long hikes in Alaska and northern Canada before. Nothing could scare me. On the third day, I decided to take a less traveled route along a ridge near Kluane National Park. The air was crisp, the forest dense, and the sun flickered through the pines, casting dappled shadows on the narrow path. But by mid-afternoon, the wind shifted, and a heavy fog rolled in, thick and yellowish, swallowing the trail. I stopped, tried to retrace my steps. The path I had walked along vanished. 1 second, the ridge had been clear. The next, I was surrounded by a gray wall of nothingness. My compass spun erratically, my GPS flickered, then shut off completely. Then I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Soft, slow, deliberate. Not human, not quite animal. I froze, my stomach sank. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" But my voice seemed to vanish into the fog. The footsteps didn't stop. They circled me, getting closer. Each step pressed into the soft moss beneath my boots. But I couldn't see anyone. The fog shifted, and for a moment, I glimpsed something tall, black, moving just beyond the mist, not running, watching, waiting. I realized, with terror, that I was completely alone. And yet, I wasn't. I forced myself to keep moving, trying to follow the faint outline of the ridge. Every step felt like sinking into wet cement. The fog seemed alive, swirling around my legs, creeping under my sleeves, chilling me to the bone. My GPS stayed dead. My compass needle spun like a top. I had no idea which direction led back to safety. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, not behind me this time. Beside me, just beyond the edge of visibility. I froze, barely breathing. The sound wasn't human, not exactly. It had a rhythm that felt unnatural, like long limbs pacing over moss and branches that shouldn't have supported them. I called out again, my voice trembling. "Who's there? Show yourself." The fog thickened immediately. Curling around me like a living thing, I could feel a presence pressing into me, shaping the mist, following my movements. A movement caught my eye, just a blur, black and elongated, shifting between the trees. I tried to run, but my legs felt leaden, my pack heavier than ever. The forest seemed to rearrange itself, trees leaning into my path, roots tangling underfoot. Every time I thought I saw the trail ahead, it vanished, replaced by endless gray. And then I realized the worst part. The footsteps weren't just keeping pace. They were anticipating me. Every turn I took, every attempt to hide, the sound matched, guiding me like a predator herding its prey. I stumbled into a small clearing, hoping to get a better view. But the fog was thicker here. The figure was closer now. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel its eyes, its gaze burning through the mist. Panic surged. I ran blindly through the trees, branches slapping my face, snow and moss clinging to my boots. The fog seemed to twist and pull, leading me deeper into the forest rather than out. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft, rasping, carried on the wind. "Marissa, don't leave, don't go." I stopped, frozen. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. At once I couldn't tell if it was real or just my imagination fracturing under fear. My pulse thundered. I screamed, but the forest swallowed it immediately. A sudden movement in the fog made me stumble back. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting into shapes that didn't belong to any tree or bush. One shadow, taller than any human, shifted forward, almost gliding above the moss. I saw elongated fingers, blacker than the night. Brushing the mist, I tried retracing my steps, but nothing looked familiar. Every tree, every stone, every branch was wrong, as if the forest had changed while I wasn't looking. The whispers grew louder, unintelligible words tumbling over one another, but unmistakably calling my name. Then I saw a shape through the mist. A figure crouched on a fallen log, head tilted unnaturally, watching me. Its eyes reflected no light, only darkness. Its mouth opened, just slightly, and the whisper became a hiss. "You can't leave. The fog won't let you go." Fear paralyzed me. Every instinct screamed to run, but my body refused. It was as if the forest itself had become a cage, and the fog, a living thing, had decided I would never leave. I forced myself to move again, though each step felt heavier than the last. The fog wrapped around me, pressing in, muffling sound, swallowing light. Every direction looked identical. Endless gray, black silhouettes of trees standing like silent sentinels. My map and compass were useless, GPS dead. Nothing could guide me. And then I heard it. A soft crunch, close, circling. Not random, deliberate. My heart pounded so violently, I thought it might burst, and I tried calling out again, but no words emerged, only a strangled gasp. The whispers returned, more urgent, overlapping, impossibly close, coming from multiple directions. Through the haze, I glimpsed movement. A tall, thin shape, limbs too long for a human, slithering through the fog with a fluid, unnatural gait, its head tilted in a way that should have been impossible. I turned and ran, dodging roots and fallen branches, but no matter which way I went, the fog seemed to follow, curling around me like a predator. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning here. Every attempt to retrace my path only led me deeper into the fog. Shadows flitted between trees, keeping pace, never fully revealing themselves. Then, I tripped over something solid, a fallen log covered in moss. When I looked up, I saw hundreds of faint footprints in the snow-dampened earth, leading directly to where I stood. But there was no snow, no other trail. Only my feet had moved here. And I realized, with a gut-churning dread, I wasn't alone in this forest. I never had been. I pressed myself against a tree, shivering, exhausted, and tried to calm my racing heart. The whispers intensified, forming shapes in my mind, calling my name, repeating over and over. Something moved through the fog, slow, deliberate, circling me, and I could feel its gaze burning into my back even when I couldn't see it. Then I saw them, eyes, dozens of them, scattered in the fog. Not glowing, not reflective, just black, empty, human-sized. They hovered at different heights among the trees. Watching, I counted at least 20 before I realized there could be more. Unseen, waiting. They blinked, or maybe they didn't. But every time I tried to run, they shifted closer. Panic clawed at me. I screamed, tearing through the underbrush, branches slapping my face. My pack snagged on a tree, yanking me backward. I tore free, stumbled down a slope, and fell into a shallow creek. Water soaked my boots, cold slicing through my layers. When I looked up, I was surrounded. The fog had thickened to an impossible density. I couldn't see more than a few feet, and then a massive shadow moved at the edge of my vision, gliding effortlessly across the terrain, its head tilted, long arms reaching toward me just out of reach. A whisper floated in the cold air, not from the figure, but inside my own head. "You're mine now, lost in the fog forever." I ran blindly, knowing every step only brought me closer to it. The forest closed in around me. Every tree seemed taller, every shadow darker, as if the fog itself had grown teeth. My breath came in short, freezing gasps. I could no longer hear my own footsteps. Only the whispers and the crunch of something moving behind me, keeping pace perfectly. Then I tripped over a hidden root and landed hard in the snow. Pain shot through my leg, but I couldn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly, my hands brushing against icy trunks and frozen moss. The fog thickened further, curling around me, carrying a smell of wet earth, iron, and decay. Through the gray haze, a shape emerged. Too tall, too thin, impossibly elongated limbs, eyes that reflected nothing, watching me like a predator studying prey. It didn't run. It didn't move quickly. It simply followed, gliding just behind the fog as if it were part of it. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed. I tried to run faster, but the fog shifted to block me, creating walls of mist, turning the forest into a labyrinth with no exit. Every instinct screamed that I needed to survive, yet every step felt like a trap. Then, from somewhere above, the whispers formed words I could barely comprehend. "You're already inside. We are your trail now." I realized, in that chilling instant, that the forest had claimed me, and whatever was out here wasn't going to let me leave alive. I slowed, too exhausted to keep running, leaning against a massive pine. That's when I saw them, dozens of dark silhouettes, standing perfectly still among the fogged trees, not human, yet vaguely human-shaped. Their heads tilted unnaturally, limbs impossibly long. They didn't move, didn't breathe audibly, yet I felt their attention, every pair of eyes fixed on me. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping into a deafening chorus, calling my name, telling me to stop, warning me. I wanted to turn and flee, but my body refused. It was as if the fog itself had fused with the forest, and every tree, shadow, and shape was conspiring to trap me. I stumbled forward, crashing through branches and frozen moss. The figures moved with the fog, appearing closer each time I turned, surrounding me in a perfect circle. One figure glided silently toward me, stopping just a few feet away, tilting its head in curiosity. Its eyes were empty black voids, yet I could feel its awareness piercing through me. The whispers turned into a single, urgent voice in my head. "You can't leave. Not alone. Not ever." Panic gave me strength. I ran blindly, tumbling down a slope, branches slapping me, snow soaking my clothes. Behind me, the chorus of whispers faded slightly. But the presence of those figures lingered. I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The forest, the fog, the shadows, they were alive. And I was no longer a visitor. I was their prey. I ran blindly, branches tearing at my jacket and face, snow soaking through my boots. The forest seemed endless. The fog twisted around me, reshaping the landscape, turning familiar trees into monstrous shadows. Then I saw it. A massive shape emerging from the fog, taller than any human, hunched and dark, with limbs bending in ways no human body should. Its head tilted unnaturally, observing me, unblinking eyes reflecting nothing but black voids. My heart froze. The whispers surrounded me, now louder, more urgent. They weren't coming from the shadows. They were inside my head, urging me to stop, pleading for me to surrender. Every step I took forward seemed measured, manipulated, as if the forest itself guided me toward it. I stumbled over a root, falling face first into the snow. The shadow leaned closer, gliding over the ground, impossibly fast and silent. It hovered above me, and I could feel the weight of its awareness pressing down on my chest. My lungs burned, my hands scraped the icy moss, yet I couldn't look away. Then, a cold gust of wind carried a voice clearer than before. "You walked into us. Now you are part of the fog forever." Before I could react, the shadow reached out. My vision blurred. The whispers became screams, and the forest went silent. I woke up lying flat on the forest floor. The fog was still thick, but eerily still this time. No whispering, no footsteps. Only the faint crunch of snow under something massive moving far away. I tried to stand, but my legs felt heavy, unfamiliar, as if they weren't entirely mine. My surroundings had shifted. The ridge, the path, the creek, none of it looked familiar. Trees were in impossible positions, and shadows stretched in unnatural ways. And then I realized the worst part. I couldn't find my footprints, where I had fallen, where I had run. There was nothing but pristine snow. My pack was gone. My supplies were gone. I was alone, yet watched. The whispers returned, soft, almost affectionate. "You are home now." A shadow moved through the fog, taller than the trees, gliding effortlessly, circling me without noise. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was trapped, my body no longer fully my own, tethered to the forest and the fog that had claimed me. The sun tried to pierce the mist, but even daylight couldn't reach me. I realized, with a sickening clarity, that I had never been alone in the Yukon. The fog had eyes, the forest had hands, and they had always been waiting for me. Years later, people still ask if I survived. The truth is, I'm here, but I'm not the same. The fog follows me in dreams, creeping under doors, curling around corners. Sometimes I see those elongated shadows in my peripheral vision, watching. I've tried to warn others, hikers, campers, travelers, but they don't believe me. How could they? There's no proof, only the feeling of being watched, the whispers, and the chilling knowledge that the Yukon doesn't let go. The forest claimed me that day, body and mind, and part of me still roams within its fog. And sometimes, when the wind shifts, I hear a voice that isn't mine. "Marissa, you can't leave. I no longer venture into the wilderness alone. I never hike at night." And yet, the forest remembers. The fog remembers. And it waits for the next one to wander in. Somewhere out there, deep in the Yukon, the mist coils around the trees, the shadows shift silently, and the whispers continue. And one day, it may call your name too. My name is Derek Lawson, and I've always considered myself a capable outdoorsman. But nothing prepared me for what happened the night I took shelter in an abandoned cabin deep in the Yukon wilderness. I had been hiking alone for 3 days, following a trail marked only on old maps. Supplies were low, snow had started to fall, and the wind cut through my layers like knives. As night approached, I spotted a faint outline of a cabin through the trees. Relief surged through me. A warm place to rest, dry off, and escape the freezing night. The cabin looked abandoned, but intact. The wood was weathered, the roof sagging slightly under snow. A faint plume of smoke rose from the chimney. Though the fire was long dead, I hesitated at the door, feeling a strange chill. but hunger and exhaustion won. I stepped inside. The air was stale, smelling of damp wood and decay. Furniture lay scattered, a broken chair, a collapsed table, remnants of someone's life long forgotten. I set down my pack, lit a small lantern, and tried to shake off the unease creeping into my spine. Then I heard it, a floorboard creaking upstairs. I froze. No one else should be here. The forest outside was silent. I strained my ears. Nothing. Another creak, slower this time, deliberate. It wasn't the wind. I swallowed hard. My instincts screamed to leave, but the snowstorm outside had already buried the path. I wasn't safe outside. And as I climbed the stairs cautiously, lantern shaking in my hand, I realized I might not be safe inside either. I climbed the creaking stairs slowly, every step groaning under my weight. My lantern trembled in my hand, casting long, flickering shadows that danced along the walls. The upper floor was narrow, a single hallway with several closed doors. The air smelled worse here. Damp, metallic, almost like blood mixed with rotting wood. I reached the first door and pushed it open. A small bedroom, empty except for a bed frame missing its mattress. Dust swirled in the lantern light. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet the hair on my neck stood on end. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. Then I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible whisper from the far end of the hall. "Derek." My blood ran cold. I spun toward the sound. Nothing. The door at the end of the hall was closed. I didn't remember it being closed before. I approached cautiously, lantern held high. Another whisper, closer this time. "You shouldn't be here." I reached the door, hand trembling. I pulled it open, empty. The room was pitch dark, but I could see faint scratches along the floor, as if something had been dragged across the wood. My heart thumped painfully. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. The room plunged into darkness. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, echoing in the confined space. My lantern flickered violently, then went out. I was left in total darkness, alone. And yet, I could feel the presence of someone, or something, standing just inches away. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to calm my racing heart. My lantern was dead. Darkness pressed in on me like a living thing. Then I felt it. A cold breath on the back of my neck, slow, wet, unnatural. I spun around, trying to see in the pitch black. Nothing. The whispers had stopped. Silence. But the air had weight. Thick, heavy, like something solid hovering just out of reach. I fumbled for my phone, but it had no signal. No light. No escape. Panic surged. Yet I couldn't move. It was as if invisible hands held me in place. Another cold exhale brushed against my ear, closer this time. "You shouldn't be here." The voice rasped, hollow and echoing, as if it came from the walls themselves. I screamed, stumbling backward, and my hand hit the floor. I caught something. A small, carved wooden figure. Its face was featureless, except for two dark, hollow eyes. I dropped it immediately. But the moment I did, I felt movement behind me. Slow, deliberate, circling. The air grew colder. Frost formed on the floorboards, creeping toward me like fingers, shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, twisting into shapes that weren't human. I realized then that the cabin wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting. Waiting for someone to enter, waiting for me. And now, it would not let me leave. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, every nerve screaming. The cabin felt alive, breathing around me. The air vibrated with faint whispers, too numerous to count, coming from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Each voice called my name differently, urgent, pleading, malicious. I moved toward the hallway, hoping to reach the stairs, but every step I took seemed to stretch the distance. The shadows shifted unnaturally, elongating and twisting, forming grotesque shapes I couldn't identify. My lantern flickered back to life for a brief second, enough to reveal dark stains along the floorboards, old, dried blood, and claw-like marks along the walls. I froze. Something moved above me. A low scraping, slow, deliberate, echoing through the wooden beams. I could see faint outlines of feet above the ceiling, pacing, circling. My chest tightened. I knew I wasn't alone on this floor. Then a whisper right in my ear, soft and wet. "You shouldn't have come." I spun around, nothing. The shadows writhed, and the walls seemed to close in. Panic clawed at me. I had to leave. But every door I tried to open was locked. No windows would budge. The cabin had become a cage. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the end of the hallway, motionless. Two tall limbs, impossibly long, head tilted unnaturally, watching me, waiting. Fear propelled me toward the staircase. Every step down was slow and deliberate, creaking under my weight, echoing through the empty cabin. I tried to focus, ignoring the oppressive feeling that something was circling me. The shadows seemed to lengthen with every step, crawling up the walls, stretching toward me like black smoke. I reached the last step and froze. A hand, impossibly long, skeletal, blackened, shot out from the darkness and grazed my shoulder. Pain flared, but it was nothing compared to the ice-cold dread that froze me to the spot. I could feel its presence breathing down my neck, whispering into my mind. "You belong here." I stumbled down the remaining steps, crashing into the floor below. The cabin groaned, the ceiling shaking as if alive. The air was thick with cold, and frost formed around my boots instantly. The lantern sputtered, and in the faint light, I saw them. Dozens of dark shapes emerging from the shadows, moving slowly, circling me like predators. I tried to run, but the cabin was endless now. Rooms shifted in impossible ways, hallways lengthening, doors appearing and disappearing. No matter where I turned, the figures were always there, silent, watching, waiting. A deep, guttural whisper echoed in the air. "Once inside, there's no leaving." I realized then the cabin had trapped me. Not just physically, but mentally, spiritually. Whatever haunted this place wasn't just waiting. It had been feeding on anyone foolish enough to enter. I stumbled through the cabin, trying every door, but each led to the same endless hallways and shadows. My breath came in ragged gasps, and frost formed on my clothes as if the air itself were alive. A staircase I hadn't noticed before appeared at the back of the hall, leading upward. I hesitated, but a pull in my chest, a mix of fear and compulsion, drew me up. The attic was worse. Dim light filtered through broken boards, revealing cobwebs thick as ropes, old furniture draped in dusty sheets, and shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls. Then I noticed the floor, etched with hundreds of symbols, scratched deep into the wood. A chill ran down my spine. These were not random marks. They were deliberate, ritualistic, and waiting. Something moved behind me. A dark figure, taller than the ceiling, limbs bending unnaturally, its head tilted, eyes hollow, observing me. It stepped forward, silent, dragging a shadow behind it that seemed to writhe independently. The whispers returned, this time chanting in a strange, guttural rhythm. My body froze. I realized the cabin wasn't just haunted. It was alive, feeding on fear, and I was now part of its ritual. A single thought burned through my mind. I needed to get out. But the attic had no windows, no exit, just walls and shadows that watched me with patience and hunger. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, pressing into my skull. Every symbol on the floor pulsed faintly, as if responding to my presence. I felt a pull, as though invisible hands were dragging me toward the center of the room. I stumbled, resisting, but my body betrayed me. I felt cold fingers wrap around my wrists. Unseen yet unbreakable shadows rose from the corners, moving toward me, limbs twisting like black smoke. The chanting of whispers became words I could understand. You are ours. You are ours. You belong. Panic surged. I screamed, tried to run, but every exit dissolved before me. The shadow figures converged, forming a wall of blackness that pressed in. My lantern flickered violently and went out. Total darkness enveloped me. I felt something enter my mind, a presence, ancient and malevolent, probing, consuming memories, twisting reality. I realized the cabin had been waiting for years, centuries maybe, feeding on travelers, drawing them into its attic for the ritual. Then, a cold, hollow voice resonated in my skull. You came willingly. Now you will stay. The shadows surged. The symbols on the floor glowed faint red, and the attic walls seemed to pulse, breathing with life. Every instinct screamed to resist, but I felt my body move on its own, drawn toward the center, into the cabin's ritual. I tried to fight, but it was useless. My body obeyed the cabin, my mind consumed by whispers and shadows. I saw one figure step closer, impossibly tall, head tilted unnaturally, eyes black voids staring into mine. Its elongated hand reached out, and I felt a cold, crushing force pressed down on my chest. The attic pulsed with energy, the symbols glowing brighter, shadows stretching and twisting around me. The whispers became a deafening roar, chanting my name, recounting every fear I'd ever had. My own voice joined them involuntarily, screaming into the darkness. And then, a sudden silence. The figure stopped, tilting its head, observing. The shadows froze. The symbols dimmed. I gasped, chest heaving, realizing I had been judged. A whisper, softer this time, echoed in my mind. You may leave, for now, but you carry us with you. I stumbled down the stairs, the cabin quiet once more. The door at last opened to the snowy night outside. I ran blindly into the forest, my breath freezing in the air, my heart hammering. But the terror did not leave me. Every shadow in the forest seemed elongated, every creak of wood or rustle of snow, a whisper calling my name. I had survived the cabin, but the cabin had never released me fully. I know now it waits, patient and eternal, for the next traveler who dares to step inside. I escaped the cabin into the frozen Yukon night, snow crunching underfoot, heart pounding violently. The forest was eerily silent, but I could feel it, the cabin, the shadows, the ritual, still with me. Every step I took seemed guided, every rustle of trees a whisper calling my name. Days passed. I returned to civilization, but the terror didn't leave. Shadows lingered in my peripheral vision longer than they should be, stretching unnaturally. I heard faint whispers at night, soft and wet, uttering my name. The air in my small apartment sometimes smelled of damp wood and snow, as though the cabin had followed me. I tried to speak of it, to tell others. Friends laughed it off, but I could see the unease in their eyes. They sensed it too, even if they didn't understand. And the nightmares. Oh, the nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the cabin. The shadows circling, the symbols glowing faint red, the whispers chanting, pulling me toward the attic once more. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, shaking, the wooden figure I had found lying on my nightstand, its hollow eyes staring into mine. I understood then. Escaping the cabin didn't matter. Its influence reached beyond its walls. I carried part of it with me, a seed planted deep in my mind, ensuring I would never truly be free. Years later, I still hear it. A whisper when I walk alone, shadows that stretch unnaturally, corners of rooms that feel impossibly dark. The Yukon cabin never let me go. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the faint scraping of wood. A staircase creaking in a place I haven't been. I've tried to warn others, to write about it, but the words never capture the horror. No one believes me. How could they? There's no evidence, no proof, just a memory. A haunting presence. A carved wooden figure that moves on its own. Sometimes I think it waits for me to return. And deep down, part of me wants to go back, to see if I can face it, to challenge the shadows that claimed me. But I know the truth. The cabin feeds on fear, and it never releases its prey fully. I live with it every day. I see it in every dark corner, in every flicker of a shadow, in every creak of a floorboard. I hear its whispers constantly. And I know with absolute certainty that one day it will come for me again. If you ever find an abandoned cabin in the Yukon, don't enter, step back, run, and pray that it isn't already waiting for you. Because if it is, you'll never leave. My name is Ethan Miller, and I was guiding a small winter expedition along the Yukon River when the nightmare began. The trip was supposed to be routine: snow, ice, and survival training. But nothing could have prepared me for the horror that awaited. It was late afternoon, and the sky had darkened under heavy snow clouds. The river stretched ahead, frozen solid in most parts. Cracked in others, I led the group carefully across a wide, snow-covered stretch. But I kept feeling watched. The forest lining the riverbank seemed too quiet, the wind carrying whispers I couldn't place. We made camp on a narrow strip of ice, my team trusting me to keep them safe. As the night deepened, the snowstorm worsened. Shadows flickered in the corner of my eyes, something moving just beyond the tree line. I told myself it was exhaustion, paranoia, but the feeling persisted, gnawing at my mind. Around midnight, a sound stopped me cold, the ice cracking from underneath us. The river was breathing, groaning. Something massive lurked beneath the frozen surface. I saw a shape, long, black, serpentine, moving just under the ice. My heart froze. The team was asleep, unaware. I tried to shake the feeling, rationalize it. Maybe it was a driftwood shadow, maybe the ice cracking normally, but the whispers started then. Soft, guttural, calling my name. I wasn't imagining it. Whatever was beneath that ice knew I was awake. I realized with dread that our location, our safety, our very lives depended on whether the river would allow us to leave, and tonight it had its own rules. I couldn't sleep. The snowstorm outside made everything muffled, but the river beneath the ice groaned and shifted like it had a life of its own. I rose to check the perimeter, trying to keep calm. But each step on the brittle ice sent tiny cracks radiating outward. My heart raced with every sound. That's when I saw it. A dark shadow under the ice, moving fast, darting beneath us. It wasn't a fish, it wasn't debris. Its length was impossible, curling and stretching like a nightmare made real. My stomach dropped. I called out to my team, but the words barely escaped my lips over the wind. I tried to step closer for a better look, and the ice beneath me trembled, as though sensing my presence. The whispers began, low, guttural, almost intelligent. They weren't coming from the wind. They were inside my head, calling me by name, taunting, warning. I froze, the lantern in my hand shaking violently. Then A massive crack ran under my feet. I stumbled, catching myself just in time. The shape beneath the ice paused, as if observing me, measuring me. My instincts screamed to retreat, but every move felt trapped, as though the river itself had become a predator. I looked toward my team, all still asleep in their tents. Their presence made the stakes worse. Whatever lurked beneath the ice wasn't just after me. It was waiting, patient, intelligent, and hungry. Suddenly, the ice trembled violently. A deafening crack split the night. I screamed as the river erupted beneath us, sending snow and ice shards flying. My boots skidded on the slippery surface. I saw it then. The massive black shape breaking through the ice, a long, sinuous body emerging with unnatural speed. The shadows around the campsite seemed to bend toward it, as if the forest itself aided the creature. My lantern fell, shattering on the ice, and I was plunged into darkness, except for the moonlight glinting on its glistening black scales. Its head rose, impossibly large, with eyes that reflected nothing but hunger. I tried to shout a warning to my team, but the wind stole my voice. One of the explorers stirred, confused, as the creature surged toward us. Ice cracked beneath its massive weight, creating a web of fractures that spread toward the tents. I grabbed a flare, waving it, trying to scare it off. The beast recoiled briefly, then lunged again. Whispers filled my mind. Guttural, mocking, promising death if I didn't obey. My limbs felt heavy, my will bending under the pressure of unseen forces. I realized then that the Yukon River was alive. This was no ordinary predator. It was ancient, intelligent, and malevolent. It had been waiting beneath the ice for anyone foolish enough to cross its frozen domain. The creature paused, coiling beneath the fractured ice, watching me with those unblinking, abyssal eyes. I realized then that the river wasn't just a barrier. It was a trap. Every crack in the ice, every shimmer of dark water beneath, was a predator's tool. I turned to warn my team, but they were still groggy in their tents, oblivious to the horror lurking beneath. Panic surged through me. I needed to act fast. I tried to retreat toward the riverbank, but the ice groaned and shifted underfoot. Cracking in long lines that spread like spider webs, the shape beneath moved with terrifying speed, following me silently. I stumbled and fell, my hands grazing a fissure in the ice. I could see it. The water below teeming with shadows, writhing, twisting, multiplying. The whispers returned, louder this time, insistent, echoing inside my skull. "Stay. You cannot leave." I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline coursing through me. My mind screamed logic, but the river defied it. The forest lining the river seemed distant, unattainable. The creature surged again, a ripple beneath the ice racing toward me like a predator testing its prey. I realized with icy dread that the Yukon itself was alive, watching, feeding, and ready to claim anyone who dared cross its frozen veins at night. Escape wasn't guaranteed. Survival depended on outsmarting a force far older, far smarter, and far hungrier than I had ever imagined. Without warning, the ice beneath me shattered. I fell hard, arms scraping against the frozen surface as a wave of black water surged up through the fissures. The creature emerged partially, its serpentine body twisting and writhing, scales glinting in the faint moonlight. Its head was enormous, eyes void black, mouth wide, showing jagged, ice-encrusted teeth. I scrambled to my feet, trying to retreat, but every step threatened to break the ice further. The whispers were deafening now, multiple voices overlapping in a chaotic chant, urging me to stay, promising death if I fled. My team began to stir in the distance, hearing the ice groan, but none could see what I saw, the ancient horror beneath. The creature struck again, thrashing, Sending shards of ice flying toward me like deadly projectiles, I dove sideways, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow. The river trembled beneath me, each movement of the beast causing massive cracks to spiderweb in every direction. I realized that logic and skill wouldn't save me. This wasn't a fight of strength. It was a test of cunning, reflex, and sheer willpower. One wrong move, and the river would consume me, dragging me beneath its frozen, shadowed depths, joining the countless others it had claimed before. And the whispers made it clear. It knew my every thought, my every fear, and was feeding on them. I ran, each step sending icy shards scattering across the frozen river. The creature followed with impossible speed, gliding silently beneath the cracked ice. The whispers in my head were relentless, filling every corner of my mind. Stop. You cannot escape. You belong. My lantern lay shattered, leaving only the pale moonlight to guide me. Every crack in the ice was a potential trap. The snowstorm had intensified, and visibility was near zero. I could barely see my team's tents in the distance, but the river had widened into an endless expanse of darkness and treacherous ice. Then I saw it. A fissure opening beneath my foot, black water gaping, cold and uninviting. I leapt sideways, heart hammering, barely avoiding a plunge. The creature surged upward again, head and massive coils breaking through the ice, thrashing violently. It was enormous, far bigger than any snake or animal I had ever seen. Its eyes locked onto mine, intelligent, malevolent, calculating. I realized the creature wasn't just attacking, it was testing me, herding me toward some unknown end. The ice groaned beneath me, cracks spreading like lightning. If I misstepped, it would swallow me instantly. I had to survive. But every instinct told me the river itself was alive, willing it to happen, and the night air was thick, almost solid, and the whispers grew louder. I was alone on the frozen river, trapped between the ice and an ancient, intelligent predator, with no idea if I could survive. Desperation overtook me. The river was endless ice and darkness. The creature's head rose again, long black coils surging beneath the surface, each movement sending cracks toward me. I realized I couldn't outrun it. The ice itself was a weapon, each step bringing me closer to death. Then I saw it. A narrow strip of snow-covered land at the river's edge, only a few meters away. My pulse surged. If I could reach it, I might survive. If not, I would plunge into the frozen abyss. I took a deep breath and ran, every step trembling, ice cracking beneath me. The creature lunged. Shadows rippled across the ice, the whispers screaming inside my head. I leaped, feet barely making it to solid ground, and felt a sudden rush of relief as I collapsed on the snow. The creature paused at the river's edge, its massive coils thrashing violently, sending ice and snow flying. Its eyes met mine, intelligent, furious, calculating. It didn't leave. It simply withdrew slightly, waiting. The whispers in my head softened, almost respectful. You survived, this time. But I knew better. Survival didn't mean freedom. The creature had tested me, learned me, and it would wait. Patient, ancient, hungry. The Yukon had claimed many before me, and it would claim again. I lay on the snowbank, gasping, soaked in sweat despite the freezing air. The creature retreated into the river, but didn't vanish. I could sense it, lurking beneath the ice. The whispers in my head continued, soft, incessant, a reminder of the terror I had barely survived. I knew the others were safe, at least for now, huddled in their tents, oblivious to the river's ancient predator. But I also knew it had studied me, learned me. Its intelligence was beyond anything natural. It wasn't just an animal. It was a guardian, a predator, a force of the Yukon itself. The ice groaned under my weight as I tried to move, still trembling. Every sound, every shadow, every gust of wind seemed amplified, taunting me, reminding me that the night and the river were alive. I realized then that the Yukon wasn't just a place of wilderness. It was a place of judgment. And the river was its instrument. The creature wasn't done, not yet. Its patience was infinite, its hunger eternal. I didn't know how I would sleep tonight, or any night after. I didn't know if I could ever forget the glint of its black eyes or the whispers calling my name. One thing I knew for certain: the frozen river had marked me, and I would never truly escape it. I thought I was safe on the snowbank, but the river had other plans. The ice groaned violently beneath the remaining patches of frozen water, sending shockwaves through the bank. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering, knowing that any second I could be pulled back into its grasp. The creature surged again, faster this time, coiling beneath the ice like a living nightmare. The cracks spread in jagged lines, sending chunks of ice flying in all directions. My team's tents were shaking violently. Snow tumbling like rain, I shouted warnings. But the wind stole my voice. Then I heard it, the whispers again, louder, chanting my name, circling inside my mind. They were no longer just voices. They were a command, a threat, a promise of doom if I didn't obey. The creature's head broke through the ice, glistening black eyes locked onto mine. I froze, realizing the full scope of what I faced. This wasn't an attack. It was a hunt. I lunged forward, dragging a nearby flare, trying to keep it at bay. But logic and courage were meaningless here. The Yukon River had its own rules, ancient and eternal. The creature didn't just want me dead. It wanted to instill fear, to mark me, to ensure that the whispers would follow me long after I escaped. I felt the icy water lap at my boots, and the shadows of the river stretching across the ice seemed alive, reaching for me. I realized with a crushing certainty, the frozen river didn't just harbor a predator. The river itself was the predator. I survived the night, barely. The creature withdrew beneath the ice, leaving only jagged cracks and scattered debris. My team and I made it back to camp, shaken and silent, aware we had witnessed something unnatural. But the horror didn't end there. Even days later, I could hear whispers in the wind, faint and guttural, repeating my name. Shadows seemed longer, darker, more deliberate. I could feel the river's presence in every body of water I saw. A subtle tug, a reminder of what had marked me. Sleep was impossible. Every night, I dreamed of the ice cracking beneath me, of the creature's black eyes, its massive, writhing body. The whispers called me to return, promising a fate worse than death. I realized then the terrifying truth. The creature wasn't just part of the river. The river itself was alive, patient and intelligent, ancient and eternal. It claimed those who crossed it, but even those who escaped carried its mark, a lingering fear, a shadow in their mind, a reminder that it was always waiting. I warn anyone who ventures into the Yukon in winter. Respect the rivers, respect the ice, and heed the silence. Because beneath that frozen surface lies a predator beyond comprehension, and its patience is infinite. If it chooses you, you may never truly escape. My name is Lucas Hayes, and I've been a prospector and guide in the Yukon for over a decade. I thought I'd seen it all: the frozen rivers, the endless forests, the blizzards that could erase entire trails. But nothing could have prepared me for the mine I stumbled upon near Dawson City. It wasn't marked on any map. No records existed. Local elders whispered of abandoned claims that disappeared decades ago, but I dismissed them as old folk tales. That day, a snowstorm forced me off the main trail. I wandered through a canyon, searching for shelter, and found the entrance, a gaping hole in the mountainside, dark and foul-smelling. The air that poured out was thick and cold, carrying an acrid scent of rust and decay. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing tracks that didn't make sense. Boot prints older than the snow around them, mixed with deep claw marks gouged into the earth. I called out jokingly, "Hello? Anyone here?" The sound echoed back with a hollow metallic clang that made my stomach tighten. A faint whisper answered me, almost human, almost pleading, but distorted and chilling. Curiosity and something darker compelled me to step inside. The walls of the mine were slick with moisture, and the tunnel stretched far beyond where light could reach. The deeper I went, the colder it became, until I could see my breath forming icy clouds in the beam of my flashlight. Then I saw it. A set of skeletons, half buried in debris, with helmets fused to their skulls as though time itself had swallowed them whole. And in the shadows beyond, I thought I saw movement. Something waiting. Something hungry. I stepped deeper into the mine, my flashlight cutting a narrow path through the suffocating darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves exhaled a chill that seeped into my bones. Each step echoed unnaturally, a hollow, metallic clang that bounced back at me from every jagged wall. Then I heard it. A whisper, soft and frantic, calling my name, "Lucas, Lucas." My pulse skyrocketed. No one should have known my name. The sound came from all directions, bouncing off the walls, growing louder, more insistent. I froze, trying to rationalize it. But my gut told me something was very wrong. I noticed symbols etched into the walls, ancient and unfamiliar, carved deep as if to summon or contain something. The skeletons I had seen near the entrance seemed to be positioned deliberately, hands outstretched as if in warning or prayer. A sudden scraping sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel. My flashlight flickered, and for a brief second, I thought I saw movement. Shadows twisting unnaturally, crawling along the walls like living smoke. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, but the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. A voice, distorted, half human, half something else, whispered directly into my ear. "You shouldn't be here." The words were cold, intimate, a warning that froze me in place. I realized with sinking dread that this mine was alive. Or at least, something inside it was. Something that had waited decades for intruders. The whispers grew louder, echoing from every direction. I could feel it, the presence, something watching, moving silently in the darkness just beyond the flashlight's reach. My hands shook as I gripped the beam tighter, trying to push forward. But the tunnel seemed endless. Walls closing in. Suddenly, a shadow lunged across the walls, faster than anything natural. Impossible to track, I stumbled back, tripping over rocks and debris, heart racing as cold sweat poured down my back. The scraping and whispering intensified, now surrounding me, coming from above, below, and behind, and then I saw it. Glowing eyes, faint red, reflecting in the wet walls. They disappeared instantly. But the sensation of being stalked remained, every instinct screamed to flee. But the mine's twisting tunnels seemed to have no exit. The skeletons near the entrance were gone. I swore they had shifted, repositioned themselves to block my escape. A guttural growl reverberated through the tunnel. It was an animal, too intelligent, deliberate. Something ancient, predatory, and malevolent had made this mine its home. And now it had noticed me. I realized, with a sinking horror, that the lost miners had not died by accident. They had been hunted, trapped and claimed, and whatever remained was still hungry. I pressed forward, trying to ignore the gnawing fear in my gut. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, announcing my presence to whatever lurked in the darkness. The walls of the mine seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting ever so slightly, as if alive. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath freezing midair. The whispers were relentless now, overlapping, echoing from all directions. I could hear the frantic voices of the lost miners, twisted and distorted, mixed with something else. Something older and darker, it spoke in guttural tones I didn't understand. Yet the meaning was clear. I was trespassing in its domain. I stumbled into a larger cavern, and my flashlight illuminated a horrifying sight. Piles of rusted tools, helmets fused with skeletal remains, and deep claw marks gouged into the stone walls. The shadows on the walls moved independently, stretching and contorting like living smoke. Then, without warning, something slammed into me from behind. I hit the ground hard, scraping my hands and knees. My flashlight tumbled away, leaving me in near total darkness. The whispers grew louder, circling me, urgent and mocking. "You shouldn't be here. You'll join them." I scrambled to grab my flashlight, shaking violently. The shadows moved closer, creeping along the walls, floor, and ceiling. I realized with sickening clarity, the mine was alive, and it had me trapped. Every exit I thought I saw was a trick, a lure designed to keep me inside. I managed to scoop up my flashlight, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The beam flickered across the cavern, revealing something massive moving in the darkness. It wasn't entirely human, not entirely animal. A shape that twisted and writhed unnaturally, scaling the walls and ceiling with impossible speed. Its eyes glowed faint red, intelligent and malevolent, studying me. The whispers coalesced into a single voice in my mind. "You are mine, like the others." I backed away, heart hammering, realizing I was trapped in a predator's lair. The skeletons weren't warnings, they were trophies. I was intruding into an ancient hunger, a force older than the Yukon itself. I tried to escape down a side tunnel, but it was a dead end. The entity's shadows stretched toward me, filling the cavern with darkness so thick it swallowed light. The walls pulsed subtly, alive with malevolence. I knew running wasn't enough. I needed to understand it, trick it, survive it. My mind raced for options, but the whispers grew deafening, the red eyes unblinking, and the air thick with an unnatural chill. I had entered a nightmare made real, and the mine's entity had already decided my fate. It waited, patient, ancient, hungry, and I was exactly where it wanted me. I ran blindly through the twisting tunnels, my flashlight beam shaking wildly. Every corner I turned seemed identical to the last. The mine had become a labyrinth designed to trap me. The whispers echoed, circling me like a swarm, now a chorus of tormented voices. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing, alive. Shadows stretched and twisted toward me, occasionally forming shapes vaguely human, vaguely monstrous. I stumbled over debris, broken helmets, rotted boards, skeletal hands protruding from piles of dirt. The air was thick with decay and something I couldn't name. A heavy, almost tangible presence that seemed to suffocate me. Then I heard it. A guttural, scraping growl that reverberated from deep within the cavern. The entity was near. Its glowing red eyes appeared at the end of a tunnel. Watching, calculating, I realized I had to make a choice. Turn back into the maze and risk being trapped forever, or confront it in a desperate gamble for survival. My survival instincts screamed at me. I grabbed a rusted pickaxe from the debris, heart hammering, knowing it wouldn't kill the thing, but might buy me time. I moved cautiously, each step measured, aware that a single mistake could doom me to become another whispering voice in the mind. I stopped at a small cavern, cornered. The entity emerged from the shadows fully this time. A massive, writhing figure. Humanoid yet grotesque, with elongated limbs and glowing red eyes. Its presence radiated malice. And the whispers filled my mind, screaming, "You cannot leave. You belong." I swung the pickaxe wildly, hoping to strike it. But my blows passed through shadows and darkness as if it weren't fully physical. It moved impossibly fast, circling me, studying me. The walls pulsed and cracked around us, loose rocks falling like rain. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to think I realized the entity fed on fear, relished it. My only hope was to control my fear, to move deliberately, not react instinctively. I spoke aloud, trying to anchor myself in reality, in logic, in defiance. "I am not yours. You do not control me." The whispers faltered for a moment, hissing, angry. The creature recoiled slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing. I seized the moment, backing toward a side tunnel that might lead to the surface. It surged after me, shadows lashing, but I felt a spark of hope. I might survive if I stayed calm. I dashed into a narrow side tunnel, the entity following with impossible speed. The air grew warmer, lighter. I could feel the surface close. The whispers continued, weaker now, frustrated, as if my defiance had weakened its control. Falling rocks blocked part of the tunnel, forcing me to crawl through tight, jagged passages. My hands were raw, my body bleeding, but I couldn't stop. The glowing red eyes appeared intermittently, reflecting in the damp walls, watching, measuring, stalking. Finally, I saw light ahead. Faint, pale, the first sign of the Yukon sky above. I surged forward, the entity thrashing violently in frustration, its shadow lashing at the walls, unable to fully reach me in the confined tunnel. With a final burst of adrenaline, I clawed through the snow at the mine's exit, gasping in the freezing night air. The whispers stopped abruptly as I emerged. Leaving only the wind and the distant, lifeless mountains, I collapsed, shivering, staring back at the dark maw of the mine. The entity had been beaten, temporarily, but I knew it would remain in that mine, waiting. And I would never forget the malevolent intelligence lurking within, or the voices of the miners it had claimed. I stumbled into the snow, gasping for air, the frigid night burning my lungs. The mine's maw loomed behind me like a gaping wound in the mountain. Silent now, as if it had simply paused. Waiting for the next intruder, I looked around. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of the Yukon replaced by an oppressive stillness. I tried to make sense of what I had just escaped. The entity had followed the rules of its domain. It hadn't killed me outright. Not yet. Perhaps it wanted fear, obedience, or simply wanted me to carry its story. The lost miners hadn't escaped. I knew that now. Their skeletons, their whispers, were warnings, trophies, a testament to its patience. I marked the mine on my map, a silent vow to avoid it. But the memory of those glowing red eyes and the writhing shadows haunted me every night. The whispers return in my dreams. They're soft at first, then grow insistent, replaying my screams, repeating my name. I realized that surviving the mine didn't mean freedom. I had carried a mark, a curse, a memory of its hunger. I was changed. Every shadow now seems alive. Every sound has intent. The mine waits, patient and eternal. And I know one day, someone else will stumble into its grasp. And I might not be able to warn them in time. Weeks passed, but the Yukon hadn't released me from its grip. Every time I crossed a frozen river, explored a cave, or hiked in isolation, I felt its presence. the same intelligence that had trapped me in the mine. My nights were haunted by whispers and red eyes glowing from the darkness. I returned once, cautiously, to retrieve my journal and gear. The mine's entrance was unchanged, deceptively quiet, as if nothing had happened. But inside, the walls had shifted, new symbols etched deep into the stone, and the skeletal remains of miners I hadn't seen before. It had added to its collection. While I survived, I realized the horrifying truth. The entity didn't need to kill me. Fear, memory, and stories were just as potent. It extended its influence beyond the mine, a predator of minds and souls. I carry it with me. A whispering shadow in my thoughts, a reminder that the Yukon holds secrets far older and far crueler than humans can imagine to anyone venturing into the Dawson City region. Beware abandoned mines. Heed the silence, and never, ever ignore the whispers. Some places are alive, and some predators never truly let go. My name is Mara Thompson, and I've spent years exploring the wilderness of the Yukon, documenting remote locations for survival guides and travel journals. But nothing prepared me for what I found near Kluane Lake, a cabin that shouldn't have existed. It was early November, the lake already partially frozen, and I was scouting the area for winter shelter locations. The snow was thick, muffling every sound, creating a world that seemed unreal. Then I saw it. A small wooden cabin, perfectly intact, smoke curling lazily from its chimney, lights flickering inside the problem. No map or local record mentioned this cabin. No trail led to it, and the area had been reported uninhabited for decades. My rational mind screamed that it was impossible. Yet every instinct told me to approach. Curiosity overcame fear, as it often does in people like me. I stepped closer, snow crunching beneath my boots. The door was slightly ajar, as though inviting me in. I called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" There was no response, only the faint creak of floorboards inside. I pushed the door open slowly, and a warm glow spilled onto the snow, contrasting sharply with the freezing air inside. The cabin looked normal at first glance. A wood stove, a table with chairs, a small pile of firewood. But there was something wrong. The air felt thick, oppressive, heavy, and the silence was unnatural, almost expectant. And then I noticed it. Photographs on the walls, black and white images of people I didn't recognize, their faces twisted in expressions of terror, eyes hollow, staring directly at me. A chill ran down my spine. I wasn't alone. Something was watching, patient, waiting. I stepped fully inside the cabin, my boots crunching on the rough wooden floor. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and the warmth from the stove seemed unnatural. Cloying, as if it belonged to another world, I approached the photographs on the walls. Each one was more disturbing than the last. Black and white images of people, frozen in terror. Some were contorted in screams, others blank-faced, staring at something unseen. What terrified me most was that each photograph seemed recent. The snow on their coats still crisp, their eyes eerily lifelike. I ran my fingers along one frame and felt a faint vibration, like a pulse. My heartbeat raced. That's when I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost gentle. Finally, someone sees us. I spun around. No one was there. My flashlight beam caught a shadow moving in the corner, not human, elongated, indistinct, almost liquid in shape. The whispering continued, overlapping voices speaking in a language I didn't know, yet the meaning was clear. I was being watched, studied, trapped. I tried to rationalize, telling myself it was the wind, my imagination, exhaustion. But the photographs, their eyes followed me. The shadows stretched closer, flickering with the movement of an unseen presence. The cabin felt alive, as though it had waited decades for someone to stumble inside. I realized then that the warmth, the smoke, the light, it was all a lure, a trap. And I had walked right into it. I tried to leave the cabin, but the door had vanished. No matter where I looked, the entrance was gone. Replaced by a solid wall of wood and frost, panic set in. The whispers grew louder, overlapping now, repeating my name, circling the room, almost chanting. I turned to the stove, and my blood ran cold. The fire flickered unnaturally, and the whispers seemed to emanate from it. The flames formed shapes, faces screaming, hands reaching out, mouths moving without sound. I stumbled back, heart hammering. But the floor beneath me creaked, groaned, as if the cabin itself was breathing. The photographs on the wall shifted subtly, the eyes now following me wherever I moved. One image, a man with hollow eyes, seemed to blink at me. Another twisted into a grin that I knew wasn't there before. Then I heard a voice, clearer than before. "You came, now you stay." It wasn't human, not entirely. It was inside me, inside the cabin. A presence older than the forest, older than the lake. I realized with growing horror that this wasn't a haunted cabin. It was alive, and it fed on fear. The warmth wasn't comfort, it was sustenance. And now I was its prey. I needed to escape. But as I ran toward where the door had been, shadows lunged from the corners and the whispers multiplied, filling my mind with visions of terror I couldn't forget. I stumbled toward where the door had been, but the walls of the cabin seemed to shift, bending subtly as if alive. Each step I took, the space stretched impossibly, disorienting me. The whispers multiplied, overlapping, calling me by name, mocking me, coaxing me to look at the photographs again. Suddenly, the walls themselves moved, cracks forming like veins, and through them, faces appeared, pale, hollow-eyed, screaming silently. They pressed against the wood as if trying to escape, or perhaps to drag me in. My pulse raced, and I realized the cabin wasn't just haunted, it was sentient, a predator in human form, and it had trapped me in its domain. I backed away, my flashlight beam shaking. Shadows writhed across the floor, coiling around my feet, trying to trip me, to slow me down. The stove flared violently, the fire casting grotesque shapes that seemed to reach for me, hands made of smoke and flame. In that moment, I understood. The photographs weren't just images. They were victims, frozen moments of terror, trapped souls. And the cabin wanted mine too. I gripped a wooden chair, ready to defend myself, but I knew it was futile. The cabin was infinite, and I was a single, fragile body caught in its impossible geometry. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The fire in the stove roared, and the smoke twisted into a massive, grotesque shape, a shadowy humanoid figure with elongated limbs and a face made entirely of writhing, screaming photographs. It floated above the floor, slowly advancing toward me, its form shifting constantly, almost liquid. The whispers now became voices inside my skull. They told me everything. The cabin had existed for decades, perhaps centuries, feeding on lost souls, capturing fear, transforming it into its own essence. I realized, with a sinking dread, that it didn't just trap people. It changed them, added their terror to its form, made them part of its structure. I swung the chair, striking the smoky figure. It recoiled with a hiss, shadows flaring wildly. The floorboards beneath me groaned, as if the cabin itself resented my defiance. I could feel my own fear being pulled into it, threads of panic twisting into the creature, feeding it further. I had to get out. But every step I took toward where the door should have been, the cabin shifted, pulling the walls tighter, bending reality. The photographs on the walls were now moving independently, their faces screaming, eyes following my every move. And then I heard it, deep inside my mind, like a promise, a threat. You cannot leave, not yet. I realized my only chance was to fight, to survive not with strength, but with defiance. I refused to let it claim me like the others. I backed into a corner, the smoky figure floating closer, tendrils of shadow stretching toward me. The whispers were deafening, repeating my name in urgent, distorted tones. My mind reeled, the cabin itself seeming to pulse in time with my racing heartbeat. I realized the walls, the stove, even the floorboards, everything, were part of it. The cabin wasn't just alive. It breathed, shifted, and consumed. Each inhale seemed to draw fear into it, each exhale pushing me toward madness. The photographs on the walls twitched, their faces contorting, mouths opening in silent screams that echoed in my mind. I forced myself to stay calm. Panic would make it stronger. I whispered to myself, grounding my thoughts. I had survived in the Yukon before. I knew how to fight fear. I picked up a length of firewood and swung at the smoky figure. It recoiled, letting out a chilling hiss that sounded like 1,000 trapped voices. The shadows on the floor writhed, reaching for me, but I dodged, moving toward a corner that seemed less warped, less suffocating. My heart pounded, every sense screaming danger. Yet I clung to one thought. If I could remain defiant, I might survive. The cabin watched it, tested me, and I realized, horrifyingly, that my fear was now a resource. The more I resisted, the angrier it became. I spotted a faint glow in the corner. Perhaps a window, perhaps a crack. It offered the only chance of escape. I lunged toward it, swinging the firewood to hold off the smoky figure. Its tendrils lashed at me, brushing my arm and sending a chill through my body. But I kept moving. The whispers intensified, now inside my head. You belong here. You will stay. I forced myself to ignore them, focusing on the light. I could hear the cabin groaning, shifting, trying to block my path, but I pushed forward, desperate, clawing through debris. Finally, I reached the crack. I squeezed through, snow and icy wind hitting my face as I fell outside onto the frozen ground. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a cold, expectant silence. Behind me, the cabin loomed impossibly tall, windows glowing faintly, smoke curling like a living thing. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the tree line, heart hammering. The Yukon night was silent, but I knew the cabin was watching, patient, waiting for another curious traveler. Even as I reached safety, I couldn't shake the memory of its red-hot eyes, the contorting photographs, and the feeling that it wasn't just a place, it was a predator, ancient and cunning. Days later, I returned to the vicinity with binoculars, careful not to approach. The cabin had vanished. No trace of it remained, no footprints, no smoke, no structure. The snow-covered forest was undisturbed, quiet, and serene. Yet I could feel it, a lingering presence, an oppressive weight pressing against my mind. The memory of those photographs, the twisted faces, the whispers, haunted me. Every shadow at night seemed alive. Every crack of wood in my cabin at home sounded like it could bend and shift, forming a doorway into its lair. I spoke to locals about the area. No one had seen a cabin there for decades, and some even laughed nervously when I described it. But one old trapper's warning echoed in my mind. Some places in the Yukon, they aren't empty, they watch, they wait, and sometimes they let you leave, just to come back later. I realized the horror of it. Surviving the cabin didn't end it. I carried its shadow inside me now. A lingering fear, a whisper that might never fade. And the thought of anyone else stumbling into that area made my stomach churn. The phantom cabin of Kluane Lake wasn't gone. It was patient, it was intelligent, and it was still hungry. Weeks passed, but the memory of the cabin refused to fade. Every night, I dreamt of it, smoke curling, walls bending, the photograph's hollow eyes staring into mine. But then the dreams began bleeding into reality. One evening, while driving along a remote Yukon road, I saw a flicker of warm light in the distance. My blood ran cold. My rational mind argued it was a hunter's cabin, a simple campfire. Yet, deep down I knew. The angles, the glow, the sense of wrongness, it was the same. I stopped the car, straining to see. The light shifted slightly, almost beckoning me closer. The whispers were back, faint at first, then clear. "Come in. You belong." I slammed the door and drove on, heart hammering. But the oppressive feeling followed me. Even at home, shadows seemed to twitch in the corners of my vision. Photographs I didn't recognize began appearing on my walls. Faces in terror, eyes hollow, staring. It was no longer just a cabin. It was a presence, a stalker, a living memory of fear. I understood then that the phantom cabin didn't just trap bodies. It trapped minds, and mine was now part of its collection. Now, months later, I live with the weight of it constantly. Even surrounded by people, I feel its presence. A whisper at the edge of hearing, a shadow at the corner of my vision. Sleep is a battleground, with the cabin appearing again and again, smoke curling, walls bending, photographs screaming silently. I've tried to warn others, to document the experience, but no one believes me. They think it's stress, isolation, exhaustion. But I know the truth. The phantom cabin is patient, eternal, and it never truly lets go. Sometimes I see it in reflections, in the darkened windows of buildings, flickering for a moment before vanishing. The whispers occasionally call my name, softer now, coaxing, waiting. And I know one day it will reach out again. Not just to me, but to anyone who dares wander near Kluane Lake. I've learned the hard truth. Some horrors aren't contained by walls, by distance, or by belief. They live in memory, in fear, in the mind, and the phantom cabin is alive in me. And I fear it will never leave. My name is Ethan Collins, and I drive long stretches of the Yukon every winter for work, transporting supplies to remote lodges. But one night, on a stretch of highway frozen solid and coated in black ice, I encountered something I will never forget. It was around 11 p.m. The road was empty, the sky a swirl of aurora borealis streaking across the dark, starless night. My truck hummed quietly as I navigated the icy curves. That's when I saw her, a lone figure on the shoulder, shivering in a tattered parka, thumb out, signaling for a ride. I slowed and pulled over. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the headlights. She smiled faintly, but there was something unnatural in her eyes, a hollow emptiness that made my stomach knot. "Please, I need a ride," she whispered. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. She climbed in silently, the cold from her parka chilling the cab. The air seemed heavier now, thicker, as if the temperature itself had dropped. I tried to make small talk, asking her name. She didn't answer, just stared ahead, eyes fixed on the dark road. Minutes passed in silence. Then I glanced at the rearview mirror. Heart stopped. Her reflection wasn't right. Her eyes were fully black, pupils absent, and her mouth stretched into a grin that wasn't human. Before I could react, she whispered again, a voice that was everywhere and nowhere at once. Drive, or you'll never leave this highway. I stepped fully inside the cabin, my boots crunching on the rough wooden floor. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and the warmth from the stove seemed unnatural. Cloying, as if it belonged to another world, I approached the photographs on the walls. Each one was more disturbing than the last. Black and white images of people, frozen in terror. Some were contorted in screams, others blank-faced, staring at something unseen. What terrified me most was that each photograph seemed recent, the snow on their coats still crisp, their eyes eerily lifelike. I ran my fingers along one frame and felt a faint vibration, like a pulse. My heartbeat raced. That's when I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost gentle. Finally, someone sees us. I spun around. No one was there. My flashlight beam caught a shadow moving in the corner, not human, elongated, indistinct, almost liquid in shape. The whispering continued, overlapping voices speaking in a language I didn't know. Yet the meaning was clear. I was being watched, studied, trapped. I tried to rationalize, telling myself it was the wind, my imagination, exhaustion. But the photographs, their eyes followed me. The shadows stretched closer, flickering with the movement of an unseen presence. The cabin felt alive, as though it had waited decades for someone to stumble inside. I realized then that the warmth, the smoke, the light, it was all a lure, a trap. And I had walked right into it. I tried to shake my growing panic, focusing on the road, listening to the crunch of tires on ice. But every glance in the mirrors made it worse. Shadows moved independently of their owners, stretching along the snow, creeping towards me, twisting in unnatural ways. My pulse raced. The first hitchhiker leaned closer, her whisper now inside my skull, not her lips. You can't leave. Not tonight, not ever. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, tires spinning on black ice, the truck skidding violently. Outside, the highway seemed to stretch endlessly, never narrowing, never ending. Every tree along the side of the road seemed to bend inward, their branches reaching like skeletal hands. Then I caught sight of something horrifying in the rearview mirror. Not just her reflection. Dozens of faces, all staring, all screaming silently, pressed against the glass as if trying to escape. My breath came in ragged gasps. Fogging the windows, I turned to scream at her, to demand answers, but the seat was empty. The whispers multiplied, now overlapping. Dozens of voices, some familiar, some alien, I realized with a sickening certainty. This was no ordinary hitchhiker. This highway itself was alive, feeding on fear, collecting souls, and tonight, I had become its prey. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to keep control, but the highway had become something else. It stretched endlessly into darkness, snow swirling unnaturally around me. My headlights reflected off ice that seemed to pulse, faintly red, like veins in frozen ground. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. The figure from before was gone, yet I could still feel her presence. A cold weight pressing against the cab. The whispers returned, louder, insistent, echoing inside my skull. Drive, or join them. I tried to rationalize, telling myself I was exhausted, that the cold and isolation were playing tricks on me. But then I saw it in the mirror again. Another face, pressed against the glass, screaming silently. This one looked like a man I had passed on the highway a week ago. Another, a trucker I had waved at in last month. all frozen in terror, trapped forever. The aurora borealis above swirled unnaturally, green and red twisting into shapes that looked like twisting hands reaching down toward the highway. I realized the Yukon was no longer just a place. This stretch of road had become a predator, ancient and patient, and I was its prey. I accelerated, but no matter how fast I drove, the highway seemed endless. Trees bent inward, snow whispered around me, and shadows followed my every move. I understood then. This night, this stretch of highway, was alive, and the longer I drove, the stronger it became. Hours seemed to pass, though I had no sense of time. Every mile was the same. Dark road, icy forest, shadows in mirrors, whispers growing louder. I tried turning off the highway, searching for an exit, a side road, anything. But no matter which turn I took, the road looped back, twisting impossibly, leading me deeper into darkness than I saw it. A faint glow ahead, a rest stop, or at least it should have been. Relief surged through me. I slowed, hoping to pull over. But as I approached, the glow shifted, growing taller, wider, impossibly large. The building wasn't there before. Its windows glowed red. Smoke spiraled unnaturally from the chimneys. I froze. The whispers intensified. Stay. Forever. My reflection in the mirror shifted again. Faces of those who had disappeared on this highway stared back. Pressed against the glass, I realized the horror of it. The highway didn't just trap you in space. It trapped you in time, in fear, in memory. I tried to reverse, but the truck wouldn't respond. Tires spun on black ice that seemed sticky, grasping. I felt the weight of countless eyes pressing into my mind, and I knew, for the first time, that some of these souls were reaching out. Wanting me to join them, I had to act fast. I had to escape. Before the frozen highway claimed me, as it had claimed so many others. I spun the wheel violently, trying to steer off the highway, but the truck refused to respond. The ice gripped the tires like fingers, pulling me forward. That's when I saw them. Figures standing in the middle of the road, frozen solid, coated in frost. Men, women, children, all staring blankly ahead, their eyes lifeless yet somehow filled with hunger. I slammed the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt mere inches from the nearest figure. The whispers surged into my head, louder, overlapping, twisting my thoughts into a frenzy. My pulse raced, my hands shook, and my stomach churned with a fear I had never known. One of the figures, a man I recognized from a previous trip, blinked slowly. Then his lips parted in a silent scream. The air grew thicker, colder, and I could feel the highway pressing down, bending reality around me. I realized the frozen figures weren't just obstacles. They were warnings. Trapped souls turned into sentinels, guarding the highway and its secrets, and if I hesitated too long, I would join them. I took a deep breath and pressed forward, hugging the icy road, trying to ignore the whispers that now sounded like dozens of voices calling from the depths of the snow, coaxing me into oblivion. The more I drove, the more I understood. The highway itself was alive. The ice shifted beneath me, veins of frost pulsating, glowing faintly red trees arched inward. Snow seemed to swirl unnaturally, and the air pressed down on me like a heavy weight. The whispers weren't just voices anymore, they were instructions, nudging me toward the heart of the frozen stretch. Suddenly, the truck lights caught movement in the distance. Shadows stretching along the tree line, moving independently, almost like they were crawling toward the road. I couldn't swerve. The ice gripped too tightly. Panic surged. I felt something brush against my arm, cold, almost liquid. Like smoke or frost, I looked down. Nothing was there. Then, Through the rearview mirror, I saw them. Dozens of faces, some screaming, some frozen, pressed against the glass from the outside, even though there was nothing visible outside. I realized the highway didn't just trap bodies. It trapped memories, fears, and souls. I was surrounded by those who had failed before me. A living gallery of terror, urging me to succumb. I knew then that the only way to survive was to keep moving, keep driving, and never, ever look back. Hours felt like days. My hands were raw from gripping the wheel, my eyes bloodshot from staring into the endless darkness. And then, a faint light appeared. A small bridge spanning a frozen river. The first sign of civilization in what felt like eternity. I aimed for it, praying it wasn't another illusion. The whispers rose to a cacophony, screaming in rage, echoing inside my skull. The frozen figures appeared on the side of the road, reaching, stretching, trying to pull me back into the highway. I floored the accelerator. Tires screamed, ice cracked beneath the weight of the truck. But I made it onto the bridge behind me. The shadows recoiled, and the frozen figures seemed to shatter into the night, swallowed by the darkness. For the first time in hours, I felt the air lighten. I didn't dare slow down until I reached the next town. Lights flickering, warm air filling the cab. I looked back one final time. The highway was gone. Only snow and trees remained, calm and silent. But I knew it wasn't over. The frozen highway had let me go, for now. And the whispers in my mind were a reminder. It waits always for the next traveler. Days after my escape, I tried to return to normal life, but the highway haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the frozen figures, the shadows crawling along the tree line, the faces pressed against the rearview mirror. Sleep became impossible. Dreams were filled with the endless, icy road, whispering my name, promising capture. Even in the safety of my home, I felt the presence of the highway. My walls creaked unnaturally. Frost seemed to gather on windows without reason. I started noticing subtle signs. Footprints in snow that weren't mine, reflections in mirrors that lingered too long, faint whispers when no one else was around. I tried telling people what happened. Friends, family, even local authorities. No one believed me. They thought it was isolation, exhaustion, or stress, but I knew better. The highway didn't just claim lives. It claimed minds, memories, and fear itself. Sometimes, when I drive anywhere at night, even on normal roads, I feel the pull of that frozen stretch, a shiver, a shadow, a whisper. And I know the highway waits, patiently, hungry, ready to reclaim those who thought they had escaped. The Yukon is beautiful, silent, and unforgiving, but some stretches are alive, ancient, and terrifying. And I know now that one night on that highway changed me forever. Months have passed, yet I feel it. The whispers are softer now, but still present, just at the edge of perception. I catch glimpses of frozen figures in reflective surfaces, fleeting shadows in the corner of my vision. I've learned one terrifying truth. The highway doesn't forget. It doesn't let go. It feeds on fear, collects memories, and waits patiently for the next soul brave enough or foolish enough to wander its path. I still drive, but I avoid isolated stretches, especially at night. Yet, every time I see a stretch of road coated in ice, a shiver runs through me. I know that highway is alive, that it watches, and that someday it may call me back. Some nights, I wake in a cold sweat, and for a brief moment, I feel the road beneath me again. Hear whispers in my head, see the frozen figures reaching toward me. And I realize the horror isn't just survival. It's knowing that the highway exists outside time, outside logic, and that it will never truly release me. The Yukon is beautiful, but it hides monsters. Some in the trees, some in the snow, some in the roads you travel every day. And I know now, with certainty, the frozen highway never forgets. The Yukon is a land of breathtaking beauty, but beneath its frozen forests, icy highways, and remote wilderness lies a darkness most travelers never see tonight. We've journeyed through stories of the unknown, a place where cabins breathe, shadows stretch, and the frozen highway claims more than just bodies. These are not tales meant to entertain. They are warnings. The whispers in the wind, the shifting trees, the haunted stretches of road, and the silent figures in the snow all serve as reminders. Fear is real, and some places in this world hold secrets that defy explanation. To the Dark Fears family, remember this. Curiosity can be dangerous, and even when you think you're safe, some horrors linger, patient and eternal. The Yukon doesn't forgive, and its terrors often follow long after the night has ended. If tonight's stories taught us anything, it's that some encounters leave a mark, a shadow that refuses to fade. The fear you feel now, sitting in your room, is proof that the world is far stranger and darker than most will ever believe. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the frozen, haunted corners of the Yukon. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying things are not the monsters we see, but the ones we cannot escape from. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.